Hey YouTube, this is Will with Technomancers. I'm one of the mentors for the team 1758 Technomancers for First Robotics. I'm here with one of our students.
Deep Patel.
He is very interested in programming and he has a few questions for me, so I figured we'd go ahead and answer some of them today. He's done a lot of the channel artwork, so when you see the channel art, just thank him for it. So let's get started. What were some of the questions that you have for me?
Alright, so as a upcoming programmer, how would you start setting up the code for whatever you are coding?
Very, very good question. First thing I would keep in mind is entry point. Entry point's the key to any application. It's how, whenever I run this executable or whatever I'm running, where do I actually start the run? I can have all these methods, objects, those flare words, but I need to know where to start. So the first thing you need to start with is a folder structure. As you can see to the left, I have a source, main, Java, IO, GitHub, Technomancers, all of that. It's pretty deep, no pun intended. It's pretty deep in the file structure. But let's go over it. So you'll see all this other stuff that is there for my IDE, a little bit of other stuff to keep and maintain a Java application. But we have this source. This is the source code of what I'm actually going to be typing, what I can read. Then we have our main, so this is like our main application. We have Java, that's what type of application. This is a Java application. Something else you could put there is Groovy, but that's kind of another thing. We have IO, GitHub, and then Technomancers. Those last three folders are kind of arbitrary. They can be named whatever you want, and it's kind of the namespace of the application. A namespace is so other applications that are installed on a system don't step on each other's foot. They should be unique to that application. So, since this is a Hello World application, I need a unique one to Technomancers. A good rule of thumb is you reverse the domain of whatever you're working on. So, for example, our web page is on technomancers.github.io, so we reverse that and we go with io.github.technomancers, and that will be the root namespace of all of our applications. Now, inside of there, we may have a Hello World application, and that's exactly what we have here. We have a Hello World Java file, and this is where our entry point is going to be. So, the first line in a file will be package io.github, and you notice that my IDE is suggesting to me how to finish this off. It's noticed that file structure. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Don't forget your semicolons. Semicolons are very important. That's how Java knows that there's a line ending there. So the next step is to actually create a class. Since this is object-oriented, we need to create a class for everything. Everything has a class, even for the entry point. Public class, hello world. Open and close our curly braces. Don't worry about the public. That's that's something else. But we are creating a class called Hello World. That class has to be named the same thing as our file called helloworld.java without that file extension. Alright, so we do have the class, and we have to create another method called the main. This is how it knows where the entry point is. So we have a public static void. Then we need a list of string, and I'm going to name these args. The args mean whatever I'm passing through the commands line at the time. And to kind of go across that point, we're going to do system.out.println. And then we're going to print line hello world for now. I'll show you what the args do. But this right here, if I go ahead and build it, there it goes, it built, and I run it, it says hello world in the bottom right here, right? Now the args allow me to specify, like, add command line arguments to this thing. So I can say arg0. So let's just take the first arg and add it to it. Make sure it's plural. And then that way, whenever I run, or after I build it, because I got to rebuild every time I change something, and then I can say hello world, and then put deep at the end of it. So now it says hello world deep. So that is how you start off creating your very first application. Is there anything else you may want to know?
Okay, so I heard about these things called, I think, data types.
Okay.
How would you use those?
So a data type is very interesting in that every language has a base data type of some sort. Not a, but multitudes of base data types. We actually used one in the previous example, and that previous one is a string. So that is taking all the arguments from the command line and converting them to a string type object. A string for Java is a bunch of characters appended to each other. So you can have them as a list of characters. It's kind of what a string is. But your basic types, let's say we have a string, we have an int. Let's just, there we are, public int. Well, if I can type, there we are, public int a. All right, and then we have another one called string b, string bean, haha, public. We also have booleans. Booleans are very interesting in that they're true or false. So an integer is an integer. You can only go from negative whatever 64 to the 2 to the 63rd, I think is what it is. 2 to the 63rd minus 1 is the lowest number, and the highest number if you add a negative to it. Then you have a string variable. Again, that's just a list of characters. A boolean value is either true or false. So yes or no, true or false. We also have, so we have an integer, string, boolean. We have a float. Float numbers are similar to integers except they're decimals. So 1.0 is an integer technically, but that 0.0 makes it a float. It's a floating point precision. Very nice whenever you're dealing with math numbers. Widely used, especially in robotics, to get as accurate as possible. Those are the main ones that I can think of. I'm pretty sure there's a few that I'm forgetting about. So we got an integer, string, boolean, floats. I think there's a yep, there's a character right there. That is a single character. And the reason we give them these types is because if I try to set a to a string of hello world, it's going to fail out. Because it says cannot make static. Well, that's a completely different reason. Let me go ahead and make all these static real quick. And all that red. There we are. So the type mismatch cannot convert string to an integer. Alright, so I can't turn a into a string, but if I tell it to turn into an integer, like a 1, it's fine with that. We also have B, which actually does accept a string. So apparently we're Australian. Hello, mate. But if I try to turn this into an integer, it's going to fail out. So it's type asserting. It's making sure that whatever I pass in there is of correct value. There's true there because it's a boolean. A float, as I said. With a float, I think you can pass in 1 and be fine, but you can also pass in 1, 0. Oh, that was A. That needs to be D. And this needs to be hello. Oh, okay, so float's 1, but a double is another one. There we are. So G is an actual decimal, right? Float is for a floating point precision. To me, they're the same thing, but apparently not. Is there any questions you have about them so far, Deep?
So you're storing these as letters. So what are all of these letters?
These letters themselves are the actual variables. You'll notice that E right now, even though I have it set to a character, I can't set it with the double quotes because it still thinks it's a string of characters. Whereas if I do single quotes, it notices, hey, this is H as a single character. But since I set all these variables up here, I can later on down the road, like let's say in Hello World, I can add A to it. right? So if I build it real quick and run it, you'll see hello world 1. If I do, let's do G, because that's a double precision, right? With a double, you should see 1.0. Even though I only specified 1, Java recognizes it as a double and puts that 0.0 at the end of it for us. This allows us to manipulate variables and not have to specify hello world here. So a good example would be, just for this example, string message. We're going to call this the MSG for message. And then we're going to set message equal to hello world here. Well, if I can type today. Also, this bothers me that it's not lined up everywhere. And then I could type in MSG here. And you'll notice I'll get the same outcome of hello world just because it's using that variable type. Even though I didn't specify hello world in that print line, it resolves itself to whatever that variable is.
Okay.
Does that make a little bit more sense?
Yes, it makes a lot more sense.
Alright.
And also, I've been doing a little bit of personal research. I've come across these things called modifiers, so could you elaborate on that?
Modifiers. We've been using them all along, and that's actually where that static comes from. That static was one of those modifiers that threw everything off for me, and that's why I had to go back through and finish them. That's one modifier. There's 3 other ones. Public, which you see here. Public class, public static. You'll also see private and protected. So to really get a use of what a modifier is, I'm going to create another class. And to create another class, I must create another file. So let's call this one the world. So we're going to have to create a package for this one again. It's going to be the same package, even though there can be multiple files in the same package. This is going to have to be a public class, the world, and we're gonna put stuff in here, right? And this is gonna be our entry point, so let's clear that out. So let's go over what a few things are. We have a private, let's create a private variable called the sun, or a private. What should this private variable be? Private int diameter. The diameter of the world. I don't know. We have to create what's called a constructor, which I did not talk about actually, which probably should be covered. We'll probably cover that in a different episode. But this allows me to set this dot diameter equals to, let's just say 100 for now. It's an integer. So, public, and then we're going to create another method called get diameter. I'm just going to return an int and return diameter. So what this is doing is it's creating a private variable called diameter, meaning nothing else can touch it. No other class can touch this. And then whenever we create a new instance of this object, if you go back to one of the object-oriented basics, you'll see where I was talking about creating an instance of an object. Well, here's the constructor for it right here. And we're saying this constructor, whenever we construct a new object of the world, we need to set the diameter to 100, just by default. And then anyone, since it's a public here, anyone can see this get diameter method. Alright, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to create a new instance of the world. So I'm going to do the world equals new the world. And that's what creates a new instance of the world for me. That new character and then the world. This right here calls a constructor. If I go into it, you'll notice that it takes me to that constructor method I was talking about. This is what's actually called when I say new.
Okay.
So I'm creating a new instance of it. And then if I try to call world.diameter, it doesn't know about it. Diameter. You'll notice it has no clue what this is. Insert variable declarators to complete local variable declarator. I don't know what that means, but it can't see it. You'll notice I can copy this all I want and try to paste it over here, and you'll notice it has no clue what diameter is. But the reason I created a public method called getDiameter is so that I can get the diameter of the world. So I can do system.out.println and then print out the diameter of the world. And after I build it and run it, you'll notice it says 100, which is perfect. That's exactly what we're expecting. So that kind of goes through what private and public are. The static means that it's not part of the object, it's part of every single object that is of that type. It's a little bit more, let's see. Oh, here's one. We're gonna create a public static, public static boolean is round. That's a boolean value. And public static, I'm actually going to do public final static is round equals true. The final is like a constant value or variable. Constant meaning it cannot change. If I try to change it down here, it's going to throw an error at me, equals false. You'll notice it says, hey, you can't do this. You've already assigned it as final. So that's what the final property is. As for a static, this is round. You'll notice I can't call world.isRound. I shouldn't be able to, but apparently, yep, there we are. That's not the proper error, but what it's saying is, hey, you're trying to call a static method outside of a static context, because this is an instance of world, but if the world dot is round, it won't throw an error. Well, it still throws an error because I'm not actually setting it to anything. There we are. So the world is round is set to A. But then if I try to change this back to world, you'll notice how the static field should be accessed in a static way. Even though I can still access it, I'm doing it wrong because I'm using a instance of world instead of actually calling the world class, which is, it shows what every world has in common to it. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Is there something I may be able to clarify?
For now, I think I'm fine.
Alright, so I think that covers about everything. Deep and I will see you next time. Thank you guys for watching.